So good afternoon, everyone. And I'd like to first thank all the organizers for giving the opportunity to talk here. And I'll be presenting uh, how we make cloud using the turbulent noise convection and how we use that as a tool for studying cloud microphysics. So the background image here you can see is the image of the cloud droplets in the turbulent field. And it's a streak line image. It's taken with high exposure time of the camera. And you can see those nice vertical structure in this turbulent flow field. So this is the motivation for studying the droplet growth in the turbulent flow environment. And so why clouds? Why clouds are important? So clouds, as we all know, the clouds are a major part of Earth's atmosphere. 30% of our atmosphere is covered by the clouds. So they govern amount of solar radiation coming to our Earth, and also one of the source for our hydrological cycles. But in current era of industrialization and development, we are producing a lot of pollutions, and these pollutions are affecting our climate. And one effect of this pollution in our global climate is through clouds, and it's also one of the largest uncertain source for climate change prediction. So one example of this effect can be seen here. This is a satellite image of the Atlantic Ocean near the coastal region, and here you can see those streak-line kind of clouds are the clouds formed along the ship tracks. So it's a high concentration of the aerosols, and the clouds formed along those ship tracks generally has high droplet number concentration. Since they have high droplet numbers concentration, their mean size is very small compared to the background clouds. And because of the high droplet number concentration and the small size, they reflect more solar radiation. That's why they are much brighter compared to the background cloud. So the other important features of the cloud is it's highly turbulent. So this turbulent flow environment affect the cloud microphysical growth. So some of the effect is because of the inertial effect of the droplet. Like droplet has finite inertia, and it's affecting the droplet spatial distribution and affecting the collision rate. And some other things are like entrainment, as Professor Narasimha talked about, and Vipin Kumar also talk about this entrainment effect in the cloud microphysics. But along with these things, there are other features of the turbulent flow. It's like turbulent flow also causes fluctuation in the scalar quantities like temperature field. So I think here there was one scale I forgot. So it's, I think it's around 100. I'm actually not sure. Oh, okay. Actually, I forgot to put the scale, but probably hundreds of kilometers, I guess. So my aim is to study how aerosol concentration and turbulent environment affect the cloud microphysical growth, but not in terms of droplet collision, but in the condensation-dominated regime. So to study that, we make cloud in the I-Camber. It's a nice facility in Michigan Tech, where you can control the temperature of the surface independently, and you can also control the pressure inside and reach the pressure half of the atmospheric, till the half of the atmospheric pressure. And so we make the cloud by two means. One by this adiabatic expansion, other is by this Rayleigh-Bénard convection or turbulent mixing, turbulent Rayleigh-Bénard convection. So I'll just talk about how we make cloud using this Rayleigh-Bénard convection. So we apply this unstable gradient between top and bottom boundaries, and we make this boundary saturated for moist convection. And so we can achieve the dry Rayleigh number from 10 power 8 to 10 power 9 in our setup, and then also the aspect ratio of this chamber is around 2. So two by 2 in the cross section, 1 meter in height. And it's a very big facility. You can see the scale, and here are some more pictures. So how we use the moist convection for making cloud. So to understand that, first we need to understand the adiabatic mixing process. So as we all know that the Clausius-Clapeyron equation is exponential, and it gives the equilibrium vapor pressure for water vapor. So if you have the two air parcels, and if both air parcels are at different temperature, and if both air parcels are saturated, so they'll be in this along this in this saturated line. Once you mix those two air parcels, you'll have vapor pressure more than the saturation value because of the linear mixing compared to the exponential saturation curve. So we use this same phenomena in our chamber. So we make bottom warm and top surface cold, and then we also make this boundary saturated. So once the air mixed from those two boundaries, and then it formed the supersaturated condition inside the chamber. And once we have the supersaturated condition, we run it for some time so that we can achieve the steady state in terms of thermodynamic properties and turbulent flow properties. And once we achieve the steady state in the moist convection, we started injecting the aerosols. So aerosols are the particles which act as a nucleation site for cloud droplet formation. So we inject the aerosol at steady rate, and some of the aerosols which experience the supersaturation more than their critical values activate and become a cloud droplet. And these cloud droplets grow in this turbulent flow field, and finally they sediment out once they grow sufficiently large size. So the balance between the steady aerosol injection and the settling gives the steady cloud properties after some time, after initial transition. So here, these two images, you can see the difference. One case we injected aerosols at low rate, and the other case we injected aerosols at higher rate. So one with a lower rate has small, for the same light source, it's reflecting less light compared to the other cloud where you have lots of droplet, and you can see it's much brighter. So I'll show one video of the turbulent cloud. So this is the video of turbulent droplet field taken at 90 degrees from the laser sheet, and you can see those nice turbulent structure and then droplet moving in this turbulent flow field. So, as I explained, we achieved a steady state in terms of all those thermodynamic properties like temperature, supersaturation, vertical velocity, dissipation rate, droplet number concentration, liquid water content. So all those things are at steady state. So to make the boundaries saturated, we put some kind of porous materials, like thin porous material, and we have wicks connecting to the reservoir, so it draws the water from the reservoir and make the boundaries wet always. So it, based on the evaporation, it balances it. Yes, it's on the top of that line. I mean, it's like a paper. It's lying on the top of that. So during that steady state, we measured the we repeated this experiment with different steady aerosol injection rates, and we measured the cloud droplet concentration, size, and so you can see the droplet concentration increases with injection and aerosol injection rate. And if you see the droplet size distribution for those cases, you can see for highest aerosol injection rate, you have smallest mode diameter and it's also narrow. And then with increase in the with decrease in the aerosol injection rate, you have increase in the mode diameter. So it is obvious because when you have more aerosols or more droplets, you have competition for water vapor. So more competition, smaller the size. So you'll have the smaller size for the highest aerosol injection rates. But the more interesting feature here is the distribution width. You can see here that it's very narrow for a highest aerosol injection rate. And once you start decreasing the aerosol injection rate, you'll see this distribution is getting broader and this long droplet is appearing in the distribution. So why it's happening? So people have observed some broad distribution in the atmosphere. They thought this broadening is mainly the broadening of distribution, droplet size distribution can only occur because of the collision, droplet collision. But you can see the size here. The size is very small, and then for the given size and number concentration, if you calculate the probability of the droplet collision, and based on that you calculate the collision time scale, it's much larger compared to the lifetime of the droplet inside the chamber. So collision can't explain this broadening process in the droplet size distribution. So why it's happening? As I explained before, that in turbulent flow field, your scalar quantities are also fluctuating. You have the fluctuation in the temperature and the water vapor. So the supersaturation is one of the measure of the, it's a combination of those two scalar fields. So if you measure the supersaturation field inside this chamber, you find the distribution is close to Gaussian. Of course, there are deviation near the tail, which is correspond to that intermittent spatial intermittency, but which is very rare. But for the all practical purpose, it's very close to the Gaussian. So how this fluctuation affect the droplet size distribution growth? To study that, we did some this stochastic differential equation modeling using the Longines equation, similar to the modeling used by Professor Stephen for turbulent flow field. So here, the term inside this big bracket is the mean drift term. You can see the first term is correspond to the turbulent mixing. The S equilibrium is the equilibrium value of the supersaturation without any cloud droplets. And tau t is turbulent correlation time. And here the second term is sink due to the droplet growth. And tau c is supersaturation relaxation time due to the droplet growth. And it's a function of inversely proportional to droplet number concentration and the mean size. And the second term is the random noise or Wiener noise term. And eta t is a Gaussian white noise, and this the strength of those that fluctuating field. So, and similarly, the droplet condensation growth equation can be written in terms of those thermodynamic variables. So it's proportional to Z and S. So Z is a function of the molecular diffusivity of water vapor and thermal conductivity and some other thermodynamic parameters. And S is the supersaturation. And from this, you can get the equation for the fluctuation in droplet size, which is proportional to this correlation term. So we solved those two equations. We combined those two equations and then solved it for steady state. And then we found that this fluctuation or width of the droplet distribution, R-squared distribution, proportional to the starting supersaturation fluctuation and this 2-time scale. One is the tau s, one is the tau t. Tau s we call the system time scale because it's a combination of the turbulent correlation time and the phase relaxation time. So for given temperature gradient, tau t, the turbulent correlation time is fixed because the turbulent your forcing is fixed, so tau t is fixed. But by changing the aerosol injection rate, you can control this tau c parameter. And so this is inversely proportional to number and mean radius. So your tau s increases with decrease in the droplet decrease in the droplet number and mean size. And you can see this is like you can think this growth, dispersion growth as a Brownian motion or random walk. So, but in R-square space instead of real space. So you can see those classical Brownian kind of growth here, like a t power half growth in the dispersion. So to test this theoretical result, we plotted our R-squared distribution width versus system time scale, and matches fairly well, except this point, which is correspond to very high aerosol injection rate, where you have very high Droplet number concentration, and which suppresses the supersaturation mean and fluctuation such that it won't respond much. So here there's one more, just one point, but in the current experiment, we actually explored some more points here, and which confirm our theory. And so this confirmed that our theory that this supersaturation fluctuation is affecting the this broadening of droplet size distribution. So, okay, we observed this thing in our lab. What's the implication for the atmosphere? So there's one study by recent study by Goren and Rosenfeld. They use a satellite data for studying the cloud cleansing process. So initially they had very polluted cloud, and then they tracked that cloud and study their microphysical properties. They found that with the time it started cleansing, and then so at the starting its response is very slow, and they have high droplet number concentration, and then slowly once it gets cleaner, you have bigger droplets, and once when it passes some critical size and collisions start dominating, and you have precipitation, and then finally cloud collapse. So it's very this droplet size distribution is very important because first it increases the probability of collision, and second it's also the radiative properties like scattering or like effective radius and optical depth of the cloud is a function of the higher moments of droplet size distributions. And it's also kind of like this cloud cleansing also responsible for changing of the cloud from closed cell to open cell kind of structure where all the radiative properties changes drastically. So we observed similar thing in our lab. So we had the steady state cloud, we switch off the aerosols, and then we track the cloud. So we have decrease in the droplet number concentration, and at the same time we have increase in the mean droplet diameter. And similarly, dispersion also increasing with during this cleansing process. And at the same time, you also have decrease in the non-activated aerosols. So this supersaturation fluctuation is also affecting the activation. Like it's the droplet, aerosol activation is not just function of the mean supersaturation; is also depend upon the fluctuation in the supersaturation. So I haven't shown that figure here, but so this loss is partly due to the mean and partly due to the fluctuation in the supersaturation. So you can see the tau c is increasing, and once it crosses, you can see the sudden increase in the droplet size and the sudden decrease in the droplet number and the aerosol number concentrations. So in summary, we achieved the steady state cloud properties in the chamber using the Moisy-Leibniz convection, and then so we used this isobaric mixing kind of process for making the cloud. And we found that droplet size dispersion increases because of the fluctuation in the supersaturation. And it has this Brownian motion kind of growth in the droplet dispersion. And then it matches with our theory nicely. And then it also, like the cloud cleansing process is also due to the supersaturation fluctuation. And yeah, so thank you.
Second one, when you say steady state turbulent cloud microphysics, you mean steady state on a time scale smaller than that of the evolution of the cloud? The cloud is evolving, isn't it, in general?
So steady state in terms of like when you measure inside the chamber, steady with the time. But if you, of course, the droplet growth may not be steady. Like individually, if you consider the individual droplets, they're growing and then settling. So that process is of course transient. But since there is a balance between the droplet activation and then loss, that gives the steady state condition in the chamber for a long time.
Some kind of quasi-steady as far as the cloud is concerned.
Yes.
Caustics can be one explanation also, like it can be one mechanism acting.
Yes, but the size, if you see the size, it's very small. So
yeah, even small droplets will undergo caustics near a single vortex. We can talk about that.
But yeah, number and all those things, we calculated those things with the some factor. We included some factor for this kind of inertial effects in the collision rate.
We can talk about that in detail, and we'll show how that collision rate can go dramatically up in certain situations.
Okay. So the dissipation rate is around order of 10⁻³ meters square per second cube.